Hare Krishna. So I think we should just start now. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Gurun Sri Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnam Vamsha Sripam Shagrajatam Shahagna Raghunathan Mitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaitam Sadhutam Prijanam Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Lita Sri Vishakhan Vidamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanto Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कंचना गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नामस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी प्रशान्तिशतारिणे वंशकल्पातरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदो श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे Hare Krishna. So we are going to study today chapter 17, and title of this chapter is The Divisions of Faith. And as we can see here in the picture that faith has different division. In the mode of goodness, they worship demigods such as Lord Brahma and Shiva and Indra. And in mode of passion, they worship demons and other exalted personalities. And then if they're in the mode of ignorance, they worship ghosts and trees and other things. So question comes, from where this faith come? And this chapter is a very powerful chapter to understand, because this is a very common question that comes across and have been asked by devotee many times, many places, in many contexts, that why they are all different faiths, why there are different beliefs, why people are acting differently. Some says this is great, some says that's great. And today in the society, if there is something that has uh, really created a lot of confusion, that's in fact is what's the real belief, what's the real faith. And athoman tathopant, whatever one has in their mind, in their understanding, they express it and they share it. So what is the right answer, and how we should understand that from where faith comes, and what type of faith one should have. So this is what we are going to study in this chapter. So this chapter has total 28 verses, and the first verse, Arjun is asking question that what is the position of those who does worship with some faith? And then Krishna starts describing that there are faith in three modes, and that continues until verse number 7. And then there are discussions about foods. Foods are also in three mode, and then the sacrifices that one perform, type of austerity that one does, type of charity that one is engaged in, because all of these together, the type of food that they eat, sacrifice they perform, austerity they do, charity they do, all of these together determines the mood that person is in. And whatever mode one is in, he practices he practices his faith in that mode. So it's very important to understand uh, what basically these modes are, and what are the symptom of those people who are in this specific mode, in this specific uh, faith, type of faith. And then last uh, 5 6 verses going to talk about how one can basically uh, do their activities such as sacrifice or austerity or charity, being in right position, being in a mood that is recommended by Shastra. So that's how this chapter will finish. So, how this chapter connects with the previous chapter? So, in chapter 16, divine and demoniac nature, we studied in last two verses, that there are people who disregard the scripture, and people who are disregarding scripture, they are not acting as per the guidance given by Shastra. They neither attain perfection nor they attain happiness, or any types of liberation. So that's the destination of the people who are not believer of Shastra. But on the other hand, there are people who follow Shastra. And people who are following the Shastra, they know what is duty, what is to be done, and what is not to be done. Shastra Chakshu is very important to understand what is to be done and what is not to be done. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavata pranita. Uh, Dharma, the code of conduct, comes from Lord Himself. So the person who is following the Shastra, he is following the code of conduct that's given by Lord. Shastra cannot be wrong. If Shastra will become wrong, then Dharma will become wrong. That's a very important thing to understand. These are the words of Lord Himself. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, these are the words emanating from the lotus mouth of Lord. Or Vedas, these are the words coming from Lord. So Shruti Smriti Puranadi, Pancharatri Vidirvihin, acting a life or living a life which are not conducted by Shruti and Smriti or Pancharatri Vidhi Aikanti Harer Bhakti Utpadayam Kevalam. It's just some sort of Utpada. Aikanti Harer Bhakti Utpadaya Kevalam. It's just some sort of disturbance, mental concoction. So Shastric injunctions and living a life which is guided and regulated by Shastra is what came as a conclusion out of chapter 16. But in that chapter, we saw two extreme demoniac or divine quality. But there is something between these two extreme. And as you all know that majority of the people falls in in the middle category. Not too many people are rich, not too many people are poor, but most of the people are having middle age, middle type of income. Likewise, most of the people are falling. Even if you look at today on the planet, around 16% people are atheist or agnostic. Otherwise, remaining people, almost 84% people have some sort of faith. Whatever faith they have Christian or Hinduism or Islam or Buddhist or so many other types of faith, but most of the people have faith. So uh, what happens with those people then who have some faith, but their faith is not directly aligned with the instructions given in Shastra? Okay, what happens to those? So that going to be the gist of this chapter. That what happens to those people who does things, they appears to be faithful, they appears to be dedicated to certain process. What are their destination? So that's what would be basically the emphasis throughout this chapter. So I'll just go through the slide. So in previous chapter, Krishna established that faithful followers of the scriptures are divine and faithless are demoniac, which means they do not attain happiness in this life or in the next life. So in this chapter, Arjuna will ask fate of those who have some faith but not based on scriptures. Chapter 16 talks two extremes, but this chapter talks about those who are in the middle, which means have some faith, but it is not based on Shastra. So the very first question Arjuna is asking, ये शास्त्र विधिमुत्सृज्य यजन्ते श्रद्धायान्वितः तेषां निष्ठा तु कः कृष्णा सात्वं हो रजस्तमः. ये शास्त्र विधिम utsrija, those who have rejected the Shastra Vidhi, who are not following the Shastra Vidhi, yajante, but they are engaged in some sort of worship, sardhayanvitaha, with some shraddha, tesam nistha tuka Krishna. For that type of nishtha, for that type of dedication, oh my Lord, what is their uh, faith? Is it in sattvam mahorajastama? Is it in sattva? Is it in raja, means passion, or is it in mode of ignorance? So that's very clear question in the very first verse. Arjuna asked that there are a group of people who are engaged in some worship, but they are not doing that as per the vidhi given in Shastra. So Lord starts talking from here. Trividha bhavati shraddha dehi nam sa swabhavaja satviki rajasi chaiva tamasi cheti tam srinu. So trividha bhavati shraddha. Shraddha has three types. Vidha means three types. Shraddha, the faith that one has three types. Dehinam swabhavaja, based upon the swabhava of the dehinam, of the body, of the soul, of the living being. And those are Satviki, Rajasi, and Tamsi. So there are three types of faith. Krishna, right in the verse number 2, is sharing with Arjun that there are three types of faith. But that type of faith or types of faith that one gets, that is basically Swabhava Ja. It's Janma, it's Ja, it's outcome of the Swabhava. Okay. So very, very, important and powerful word is added here, Swabhava. It's also called, Samsriti. And Swabhav, that human beings, living beings, not human beings, living beings acquire is coming from the impression that they have birth after birth, life after life. And that Swabhava determines what type of faith one will have. So Krishna is very nicely sharing here that Dehinam Sha Swabhavaja. Swabhavaja. It's coming from their Swabhava, the nature that they have acquired due to previous impression. So that's very important point to be noted. But that doesn't mean that they get stuck there. So I might have born based upon my swabhava in the mode of ignorance, but that doesn't mean that I'll get stuck in the ignorance. Rather, their faith evolves. Their faith will basically transcend. And even if one is born in mode of ignorance, in tama, that person will get opportunity to elevate their consciousness and go to passion, go to goodness, and then finally come to Shuddha Sattva. So that's what basically verse number 3 is saying, that Sattvan Rupa Sarvasya Shraddha Bhavati Bharatah. Shraddhamayu Vayam Purusho Yo Yach Shraddha Saiva Saha. So Sattvan Rup, depending on according to one's existence, they acquire Shraddha. Okay, but that Shraddha is not fixed. Rather, the very important point to be noted here is that Shraddha is not fixed, but the living being, and I'm using the word living being, not using the human being, living being. So very important word here, Sattvan Rupa Sarvasya, depending on their existence. So we are existed, or we are existing as human being, but there are other living beings who are existing as plant, who are existing as insect, who are existing as birds and other bigger animals. So depending on their existence, they have acquired their faith, which is coming from their swabhava. But what is the status of that particular swabhava? What is the status of that particular faith that one has acquired? So in purport, Prabhupada is writing few beautiful, lines here that giving us a very clear understanding. It says that the type of faith that we are in is resultant of our swabhava, but that is artificial, because Krishna in Gita saying that Mamayansa Jiva Loka Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. These all living beings are my part and parcel, which means the living beings are also Satchit Ananda. That's their eternal identity. But Manasasthani, Indrani, but with mind and other senses, they are struggling for their existence in the material world. So this swabhava that living being are depicting, swabhava that living being show in their behavior, that is a artificial imposition on their original consciousness. So whatever swabhava I depict or I have, or whatever swabhava you all have, swabhava that we have received, that is a artificial imposition on our original existence. So although one may be conducted by some impression or some conception of life, some impression or some conception of life. This impression word is very important word. We all are born with some impression, with some distinguished uh, personality. That's our identity. So this impression and conception about life, being theistic or being atheistic or being whatever one may come up, that I'm a spiritual but not religious, I'm religious but not spiritual. So many segments and components and types of understanding one may have, but originally he is nirguna. So these are all these are all basically coming because of the guna. Prakriti kriya manani gune karmani sarvasva ahankar vimudatma kartamiti mannate. But in reality, living being or nirguna means transcendental. Okay, he is not part of any of this guna. He's a real jiva, jivare swarupahaya nitera Krishna das. Eternally, jivas are basically devotee. They are surrendered soul to Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a artificial imposition, and Prabhupada is saying that here, that therefore one has to become cleansed of the material contamination that he has acquired in order to regain his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So whatever faith we are in, that is basically artificial imposition, because that's not our real identity. Our real identity is that we are nirguna, we are beyond any artificial imposition, and to regain our original stage, to regain what we have lost, we have to basically engage in the process of bhakti. So that's why the faith, whatever faith we are in, one should not think that, oh, now I am kind of, gone case. There is no hope for me. But that's not true. That's what this uh, uh, verse and also through purport, Prabhupada is mentioning that everybody has opportunity to evolve their consciousness. So that's what uh, basically we get out of verse number 3. Okay, so verse number 4 says that there are worship in different mode. Yajante satvika devan yaksha rakshasmi rajasah pretan bhuta ganashanya chanya yajante tamsa janah. Excuse me. Yajante tamsa janah. So yajante satvika devan. People who are in the mode of goodness, they worship the demigod. Yaksha rakshasmi rajasah, or one who is in the mode of passion, they worship yaksha and rakshasa. Pretan bhutan ganashanya yajante tamsa jana, or one who is in the mode of ignorance, they worship preta and bhuta, ghost and spirits. So that's what basically by now we understood that there are different faiths, and what are the symptoms of those faith? If some has propensity to worship the demigods, that person would be considered in mode of goodness. And then person who is worshipping yaksha and rakshasa will be considered demon. Prabhupada is very nicely writing here that we recall that, this is Prabhupada writing in the purport, we recall that during the Second World War, a man in Calcutta worshipped Hitler because thanks to that war, he had amassed a large amount of wealth by dealing in the black market. So that man, he made a lot of money through black marketing at that time due to the World War II. So he considered that Hitler is the one who is providing him that money or whatever he thought. But he was a worshipper of uh, Hitler. We have seen that in India, the lower class of people sometimes go to forest, and if they have knowledge that a ghost lives in a tree, they worship that tree and offer sacrifices. Also, here is another surprising thing, is that Prabhupada is talking about impersonalist. Vishnu is the expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the impersonalist, because they do not ultimately believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, imagining that the Vishnu form is just another aspect of impersonal Brahman. Similarly, they imagine that Lord Brahma is the impersonal form in the material mode of passion. In conclusion, I'm reading the last few lines. The different qualities of the material modes of nature can be purified. So whatever consciousness one is in, he may be in mode of passion or mode of his faith, may be in mode of passion or in ignorance or in goodness, that can be purified through association with person who are of transcendental nature. So by associating with person who are of transcendental nature, devotees, sadhu, guru, one can basically transcend to the uh, higher consciousness. Yes.
Prabhu,
Yeah.
I have a question. So it's in some countries or cultures, like in China, for instance, I think it's Taoism or something like that. They worship their ancestors. So would that be because they're ghosts of their spirits of their ancestors? Would that be in the mode of ignorance then?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, all right.
And Krishna will say that later on in this chapter, that why he put position, why he put basically certain people and give him faith like that.
Okay.
So yes, Prabhu, yeah. If
Thank you.
somebody, yeah, and that's the purpose of this chapter, that we should also understand from these verses where our faith lies, where we stand, and also very honestly and sincerely with due humility, we can see other faith that exists out there. So the point that I was trying to make was this impersonal, Prabhupada saying here that Vishnu is basically expansion of supreme personality of Godhead, but this impersonalist, they worship uh, Vishnu, thinking that that impersonal has taken the form as a Vishnu, and that thing was not evident to me until I really came across some of the strong impersonalists, and they really, Prabhu, they read Bhagavad Gita also, and if you see at their houses, they will have similar picture, and they also try to copy what ISKCON is doing. They will have disciplic succession and all of that, very similar, you know, uh, altar. But they do not think that all of these personalities are person. Number one. Number two, they do not think that the ultimate truth is a person. But when they read Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is Param Guru. So they will say that when Krishna is saying Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, so Krishna as a Param Guru, he is talking about that Aham, who is Brahman. So very, very, kind of confusing, very, very, there they completely twist the meaning of, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, when Krishna is saying, I am the, superior, Maya Dakshina Prakriti Sute Sacharacharam. All of this Maya and Aham, when it comes, they think that this Aham is basically Krishna is representing that Aham, that Brahman. Maya Dakshina Prakriti Sute, Maya Dakshina Prakriti Sute Sacharacharam. When Krishna says, they are saying that Krishna is talking on behalf of that Aham. So this is not something that is just written here for sake of writing, but that indeed is truth. Okay, we still see people fighting and trying to justify the position of that demigod, that demigod. I do not have problem with that. I do not have problem with any type of uh, uh, statement one is making. I have no right to correct. But the very basic rule of thumb, I personally, not I personally, I should not use the word I personally, but the very basic rule of surrender. Guru Shastra Sadhu Vakya Tineta Kariya Yakya. As long as one has not read the Bhagavad Gita and has not heard about the teaching of pure devotee, until that stage, if we don't have knowledge and we are still acting against the injunction of the Shastra, it's forgivable. But as soon as one exposed to this higher knowledge, one should drop that lower understanding that one has. This is very, very powerful statement, very important statement for devotees also. That don't try to, if you are really follower of Guru Shastra and Sadhu, then from this very first place, one starts basically transcending. One start basically becoming the pure devotee by dropping all the concocted, mixed idea that we have in our mind. My dear friends and devotees, I would like to make this point very clear. We study Shastra and when try to unnecessarily justify the position of XYZ. None of our business, as a surrender student, if we are really well-wisher of ourselves, we should not try to mix, our ideas with the ideas that's given in the Shastra. Yes, if there is some confusion, if something is not clear, then one should, inquire in, one should inquire the question to their authority in a very submissive mode. But once answer is received, one should try to follow that. This is very, very important point to advance in process of bhakti. We cannot have our own idea on certain thing and some idea from somewhere else and some idea from somewhere else. By that way, it's going to be hodgepodge and mixed up, and one cannot really get the real releasement of bhakti because so many other impurities are floating around. So I hear a lot, I see also a lot, but I have no authority to correct anybody. But I personally, again, I use the word wrong. I, it's coming from Shastra. If you read, instructions of our Shastra and our acharyas, that's what they have taught, that Guru Shastra Sadhu Vakya Tineta Kariya Kya. Guru Shastra and Sadhu. Once we hear the instructions from Guru Shastra and Sadhu, then our goal is to bring that, synthesize, and act on that. Not necessarily try to see, oh, I still think that CY is curd and Krishna is milk. So what is the difference between curd and milk? It's both look white and all of that type of thing. No need. Don't worry. Don't think that CY is independent and separate from Krishna. Just focus on Krishna. Okay. So this is also, if you have still some sort of that type of thing, it's also can be seen as a attachment. It can be also seen as some sort of impurities. Okay, not having firm faith in Krishna. So these things, don't think that I know. When we are reading these things, you might say, oh, I know that when it's more in goodness, worship of demigods. That's not the knowing. Rather, really, trying to understand these things, as it is, tatvataha, is what going to help us develop the true understanding. Because this is the second last chapter of Bhagavad Gita. After this, Krishna is very much going to conclude and summarize whatever he has spoken in previous chapter. So by this now, we should have firm faith in Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this chapter should help us strengthen our understanding towards the Supreme Lord. So then verse number 5 to 6, very beautiful verse. This verse says that Ashastra vihitam ghoram tapyante e tapojana dambh ahankara sanyukta kam raga balanvitaha. So someone might be engaged in a ghor tapyante, in a ghor tapasya, in ghor austerity. But if that is not coming from Shastra, then this is nothing but dam ahankar. This is nothing but one's pride and false ego. If one might be engaged in a severe austerity, ghoram tapyante, one might be engaged in a ghor tapasya, and you would see that people going to a secluded place, unnecessarily twisting and turning their body up and down, this position, that position. I'm not going to criticize anybody, but this is Krishna saying here, listen please, that's what it's being said here. If it's not authorized in Shastra, this is basically somebody's dambha and ahankara For what? Kama, raga, balanvita. For their lust and for their attachment. For certain thing, for certain specific thing, the raga and kama, that is there. So devotee may appear a simple person living in a society, but if that person does not have this kama and raga, what is what is basically important is that doesn't matter where you live. The most important thing is that how one is detached. So that detachment has to be developed. So this is a very important point here that being made. Another beautiful verse comes here. Kashyantah sarirastham bhut gram chetasah ma chayavantah sarirastham tan vidya asuri nishayan. So then what that person is doing is that kashyantah, making kashyantah sarirastham, bhuta grama chetasa. This body is made by material element. Okay, and we studied about that. How the what the human form or any form of the body is coming into the existence. It's coming due to combination of the bhutagram. Bhutagram means the material element, and then chet shaha, and then there is chetana, and that chetana is basically kshetragya, soul and super soul. So in the body, which is made of material element, there is kshetra and kshetragya. And then a person who is not aware with the presence of soul and super soul, they are engaged in doing this ghor tapasya, which is not as per the injunction of Shastra, Tan, Vidhi, Asura, Nishayan. Krishna is saying that for sure is a Asuric Vidhi. For sure that Vidhi is a demoniac Vidhi. That's what this verse is saying. So going through line by line, as the slide says, not recommended in the scripture, but done out of pride and ego with ulterior motives, for instance, to promote a political or social end, impelled by lust, attachment, and strength, foolishly torture the body, as well as not knowing the presence of soul. Such vidhi that one is engages to be known as Asuric vidhi. Here Prabhupada says that are to be known as a person who are of the demoniac quality. Okay, so one may appear to be doing very severe austerity. And I would like to read here the purport of this particular verse is very powerful. Prabhupada says here, the word achet saha. Achet saha means mixed up. The one whose chetana is not right. Achet saha is very significant here. Because that person is, those who are not in such a position neglect and disobey the scriptures and manufacture their own way of austerities and penances. This Achet Saha word, Prabhupada is saying here, that the one whose consciousness is mixed up, who are deluded, and in the word by word meaning, Prabhupada translates Achet Saha having a misled mentality. A person of misled mentality, he comes up due to his mental conditioning and manufactures his own austerities and penances. And then The Lord forces them to take birth in the wombs of demoniac person. Consequently, they will live by demoniac principle, life after life, without knowing their relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This line, if you read again and again, 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 it should very clearly help one to understand. If one is really if one is really inspiring to be pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how that person should act, this statement should help you. Unnecessarily doing too much austerity and penance, which is not as per the injunction of the Shastra. We are hearing here that it's raga, it's kama. And what happens with that type of person is basically forced. The word specific used here is the Lord forces them to take birth in the womb of demoniac person, so that that person will keep on coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, without getting tinge of information about the Supreme Personality of God. But however, if such person are fortunate enough to be guided by a spiritual master who can direct them to the path of Vedic wisdom, they can get out of the entanglement and ultimately achieve the supreme goal. Brahmanda bharmitte kon bhagyavan jiv. Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Lata Bij. So that tells why even trying too much, why people, or Prabhu just brought the question about people in China, not to against about any country or any people, Jivdaya Nam Ruchi Sarva Dharma Sar, having compassion for all living being. That's what we want. We want to love everybody. Doesn't matter what caste, creed, color, birth, whatever one has got, as a serious soul at the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All we have is a compassion. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Jiv Daya Nam Ruchi Sarva Dharma Sar. If you have the compassion for all the living being, and if you have the taste for the holy name, that tells that you know the essence of all the dharma. So we are not trying to criticize anybody, but that's what happens. They will be put into a situation where they will not get the opportunity, birth after birth, life after life, to hear about Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then verse number 7 talks that there are types of food, there are types of sacrifice, there are types of austerity, and there are types of charity. Okay, so these people now, these moods. So we said that there are three basically vibhaga, three categories of the faith: goodness, passion, and ignorance. These are the people who have some faith. They are engaged in yajante. They are engaged in some worship process. So in that worship process, they are doing these things. They are doing sacrifices. They are doing austerities. They are part of some charity, and they have some types of specific food that they eat. So next series of verses is going to tell us that depending on type of the food that they eat, type of sacrifice that they do, type of austerities that they perform, and type of charity that they are doing, that determines that where exactly his faith falls in. So that's what basically verse number 7 is saying. Aharas tvapi sarvasya trividho bhavati priyaha yagas tapas tatha danam tesam vedam imam shrinu. So even the food Same thing. So one can make out a person's mode of faith, summary of that particular verse. One can make out a person's mode of faith by seeing his activities of eating, ahara, sacrifice, yajna, austerity, tapa, and charity, dana, dan. So by seeing his type of activities, one can understand what type of modes his faith has. Krishna will describe the three types of each of these now in series of verses. So verse number 8 to 10 talks about foods which are in the different modes. So we'll go to verse number 8. Verse number 8 says that आयु सत्व बलारोग्य सुख प्रीति विवर्धन रसय स्निग्ध स्थिर हृदय आहार सात्विक प्रिय. One's life span, purity, strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction will increase by such food. Food which are in the mode of goodness. By eating the foods which are in mode of goodness, one's lifespan, purity, strength, and health, happiness and satisfaction will increase. So how those food looks like? They are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to heart. Such are the foods dear to people in goodness. Then we'll talk about the food which is in the mode of passion. Katva amla lavanati ushna tikshna ruksha vidahina ahara rajasya esta dukha shokmaya pradaha dukha shokmaya pradaha ahar rajasya esta dukh shoka kamaya pradaha. Foods that are excessively bitter, sour, salty, and hot. Foods that are excessively bitter, sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. They cause distress, lamentation, and disease. So, if the foods are not in the mode of goodness, if it's in passion, then it will cause distress, lamentation, and disease. And then verse number 10 talks about foods in the mode of ignorance. Yata yamam gatarasham puti purupyashitam chayat ukshistam api chamedhyam bhojanam tamasha priyam. Yatyayam gatarasputi paryursitam chahyat chistamapi chamedhyam bhojanam tamasam priyam. Foods which are stale and tasteless. Yamam gatam rasam. Puti, bad smelling. Paryusitam, decomposed. Uchistam, consisting of remnants. And api chamedhyam, and untouchable. Bhojanam tamsah priyam, is dear to those in the mode of darkness. So then Prabhupada has given a little bigger purport for this verse number 10. And some of the points that being made here, I would like to emphasize the key highlights from the purport. So the purpose of food is to increase the duration of life, purify the mind, and aid, AID, aid bodily strength. So that's the purpose of food. We saw that there are food which are in mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. So does it mean that one should eat the food or eat foods which are in the mode of goodness? So to answer that question, Prabhupada is saying here that the best food is the remnants of what is offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even if the food is in the mode of goodness, a Vaishnava or a Vaishnava or a person of Brahminical quality, let's put it in a Brahminical quality, Vaishnava is little advanced. So at least a person who are of the Brahminical quality, he should not even eat the food which are in the mode of goodness. Rather, the best food is one that's remnant offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then Prabhupada talks about, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Putram Puspam Phalam Toyam Yoma Bhakta Punasati. So we are not going to basically go through all of that. But the last few line of the purport is that, therefore, to make food antiseptic, eatable, and palatable for all persons. I like the word antiseptic. Therefore, to make food antiseptic, eatable, and palatable for all persons, one should offer food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we should not be basically getting confused that food in the mode of goodness is the food that we should eat. Rather, we should eat food which are in mode of in none of these modes, but the foods which are offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then there are some mention about the sacrifices. So sacrifices in goodness performed according to the scripture. So if the sacrifice is being performed according to Shastra, then that's bona fide sacrifice. If it's done as a matter of duty, and then also without desire for material result. So what type of sacrifice one should perform? Sacrifice that's mentioned in Shastra. And we read, series, in chapter 12, many, places, we are kind of reading one after another that what is considered to be sacrifice. And here also it's being kind of rephrased and summarized that according to Shastra, sacrifice that is being performed according to Shastra as a matter of duty without desire for material result is considered sacrifice in goodness. I think it should be verse number 12, but I'm sure you understand that it should be 12. Avisandhaya tu phalam dambharthamapi chavayat ijjate pratsristahtam yagyam vidhi rajasam. So sacrifice that is done for some material benefit in this world, for elevation to heavenly planet, or for any other material desire, or if it's done for sake of pride, that should be considered sacrifice done in the mode of passion. And then I'm going to read the last one, sacrifice in ignorance. This is beautiful here. Again, beautiful, verse. Vidhi hinam asristanam mantrahinam adikchanam shraddha virahitam yagyam tamasam tamasam parichachate parichachate. So vidyahin, vidihin, vidihinam sristanam. So if there are sacrifice that is not based on direction of the Shastra, Vidihinam. And also there is another word there, Arishtanam, Mantrahinam, Vidihinam, Arishtrahinam, Asristanam means anam, that has a sacrifice that doesn't end with distribution of prasadam. Mantrahinam, there is no given method. There is no proper hymns, proper mantra that is being chanted. Adikchanam, there is no dakshina given to the priest. And Sarda Virahitam, it's done without any shraddha, without any faith. That yagyam tamasam, that yagya should be considered that it is in the mode of ignorance. So that's what we studied today. We went through there are different three modes of sacrifices. Then we studied about three modes of food, and then we talked about basically how the faith should be understood. There are three types of faith, and the faith, a type of faith that we get, it's outcome of one swabhava, but that doesn't mean that we are fixed into a specific faith. Rather, faith evolves. So these are some of the few points that we kind of got out of this chapter, and we'll start from verse number 13 in next class. So is there anything that anybody would like to share or discuss, or anything that you liked, or
Hey, Prabhu, this is Ram Kishore.
Haribol Prabhu?
I have a question, or making sure I'm understanding this properly. So with the foods, there's the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But what I took from the class at the end about that specifically. So because I've had prasadam that's been really hot, spicy, but does it mean that since it's been cooked for Krishna and offered to Krishna, and it's prasadam, that even if it's spicy, it's a spiritual food so it's not considered in the mode of passion. Is that correct? Or
Yes, yeah, that's correct. That's
okay.
correct. So normally, once it's offered to Krishna, then it's prasadam, and it's equipotent. Doesn't matter it is less salt or more salt. The quantity of salt doesn't matter. But at the same time, you would see that devotees who are basically so devotees are cooking prasadam, right? And you will see that not to do any offense at the lotus feet of any Vaishnava, but some devotees they like certain food, certain degree of spices, certain type of flavor or taste. So I mean that's that's nothing against anybody, but I have also seen that some of the devotees who are like very kind of professional cook, they try to balance. They try to balance salt. They try to balance how hot the product should be, how much fat it should be, and very much Vaishnava cooking, like a food that is not unhealthy also at the same time, not food that is going to basically excite somebody's sensation, rather food which will subdue the sensation and elevate devotee. So I'm not saying that it's, whatever people are doing is not right. I'm not saying that, but the thing here is that devotee also, as they mature in their understanding of Krishna consciousness, anything that they do with pure love and devotion. And when we are saying that pure love and devotion, means they do things which are aligned with the instructions that given in Shastra. And one of the simple example is that I was in Columbus Temple, and there Mother Kamagiri, she is disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Mataji, all she does is she is a wonderful cook, and we would go and help her. And I remember the type of chastisement that she was doing and correction that she was doing. And she was trying to make sure that the food that is being prepared is being prepared in complete devotion, understanding how it should be done. But I mean, it's her, because that's what she does. She has done that service years and years. Even today, that's what she does. She'll be cooking Sunday feast. She'll be, she was helping, asking us to come and help her cut the vegetables. We helped her a lot. So I know, as I now go back and see how Mataji was doing her service, that was completely different, her mood. But yeah, so degree of kind of surrender, or the way we serve, could vary, how we are doing the same service. But at the same time, doesn't matter if whatever love and devotion I have, whatever expertise and skill I have, if I'm putting that, making nice prasadam up to my best capacity, serving it to Krishna, it's prasadam. Even if it has less salt or more salt, it's equipotent. It's going to be equally good.
Thank you, Prabhu.
But on the same side also, we should try to, like, for example, I see many Maharajis, they will just in the night, they will have little bit juice, or maybe some sort of light liquid food they will drink. So I mean, in the beginning, everything is basically, we are just coming out of our material periphery. Still a lot of things not very clean and aligned. But as we evolve in our consciousness, in our bhakti, slowly and slowly these things will come automatically. We don't have to necessarily try for these things, but if there is desire to be serious and pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then over the time, slowly and slowly, slowly and slowly, all of these things will come in our personality, and we'll serve in a very refined and bona fide way. But wherever we are, whatever capacity we have, we should continue doing our service. Anybody has anything else that they would like to share? Any question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I ask one question?
Yes, Matani.
It's on the 4th verse.
Yes.
Verse number 4. Can you please
Yeah.
share? Yeah, so here in the mode of passion, worship the demons. So basically, so what I see is most of the people are in the mode of passion, but we also see that they worship demigods and even Krishna and Lord Balaji. So how do we understand that?
So these modes are not basically, or a person does not have only one specific mode. We are basically blend of all of these. So sometimes we act in mode of goodness, sometimes we act in mode of passion, sometimes we act in mode of ignorance. But if a person has prominently mode of passion, then that person will be more, towards worshipping of demons. If someone has prominently mode of ignorance, then that person will be more leaning towards ghost and spirit. And many times you'll see that people might have taste for all of these theory. So that means we have, we are kind of still achet saha, Krishna is saying the word. We are still in a stage where we have a mixed, faith. So, so if we are also doing Balaji is Lord Krishna, Vishnu. So worshipping Balaji is transcendental. Any form of Vishnu is transcendental. Or worshipping even Lord Shiva, if you are doing in a way that you are asking to reward you the bhakti for Vishnu, Krishna, then that's also is going to be higher worship. But most of the time, people who are going to worship demigods, they are asking something for their favor, for the return. And that's basically, although they are worshipping uh, demigods, Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, but they are asking something that will favor them, such as Hiranyakashipu and other personality. But many times we are not basically one of this mode. Rather, we are mixed of all these three modes. A type of action or activity that we are engaged in depicts that we are not just one mode, mono mode. Rather, we are combination of these modes.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sometimes, depending on the association, and that's what it's called basically. We, when we use the word conditioned soul, what is the meaning of the conditioned soul? Condition, soul. So I'm in the air condition now, I feel cold. I'll go somewhere else outside, I'll feel warm. So we are basically, our consciousness is conditioned on the boundary or the periphery that is existing around us. That's your conditions. So if we go and associate with pure devotee, looking at him, the aura that comes from him, by dealings and having QA back and forth, we start acting as a pure devotee, or we start showing some symptoms of pure devotee. But at the same time, if you go to one of our friend house and then somebody is basically having uh, kind of wine and liquor and other stuff going on, then we start pretending like in them. We start getting contaminated by their understanding, their consciousness. So conditioned souls basically depicts in a very mixed consciousness, depending on what condition he or she is imposed to. That is why it's lesson. It's basically message for Vaishnav that asat sang tyagi, you know, Vaishnav. It's very important that we should try our best to not have the association of one who is not devotional, who is not devotee. Asat sang tyagi Vaishnavachar. That's something we should try to do as much as possible. Try to associate with devotees or shastra or sadhu. That way our consciousness will always stay high. And if we keep our consciousness high, 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 then that becomes our stage. Then we have very much now lived in higher consciousness for a long time. Then that becomes our nature. So that is why what is the process of bhakti? Process of bhakti is that uplifting our consciousness. There is some inertia that's pulling us down. So we have to go against the inertia. And if we stay in higher consciousness by hook and crooks for a long time, by engaging in the process of bhakti, then that becomes our nature. And then all the lower taste that we have, that will automatically go. Visaya binivartante, nirarasya, dehina visaya binivartante. So once the lower taste is gone, then we are situated in a higher consciousness. But for us to get there, we have to make the endeavor. We have to make the prayasha. So devotee association is very powerful. Anybody has anything else that they would like to ask? Okay, so if there is nothing, then I'll chant Vaishnava Pranams and then we adjourn here tonight. Let's see who are the people we have here. I think it's still daytime, so I should say today. But, okay, so we're almost finishing Bhagavad Gita now. One more class on chapter 17, and then maybe 3 classes on 18th chapter, and then we'll start studying maybe nectar of instruction. Thank you so much. Vanchkalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhya evasya patidanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Visammal Bhakti Vrinda ki jai, Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, ISKCON Acharya Hiri Bhai Mishra Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Prem Nandi Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Dandot pranams.
Thank you, Prabhu. Dandut pranams. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.
Hari Hari.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hari Bol. Hare
Krishna
Krishna.
Prabhu, Dandavad
Hare
Pranam
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hari Hari. Dandot Hari Bol.